Good afternoon, everyone. We are coming out of recess, and I call the Senate to order. I recognize Senator Birdsell for a motion.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the Senate adjourn from the late session.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Okay, the ayes have it. The motion to adjourn passes. We are now in the early session. The Senate will be attentive to Senator Birdsell for a prayer.
Lord, lift up in prayer the lawmakers gathered here today. May we be filled with discernment and clarity as we make decisions that impact the lives of many. May we realize the need for you and for your direction. May we hear your voice as we make our decisions and follow your guidance. May we have a passion for people, for truth, and for righteousness. Almighty Father, we ask you to bless the members of our armed forces and our first responders. Give them courage, hope, and strength, especially the victims of the American Airlines and Black Hawk collision, their families, and their first responders. May they ever experience your firm support, gentle love, and compassionate healing. Be their power and protector, leading them from darkness to light. And Father, we come to honor you this day, come to acknowledge that you are the only one who can rightly lead and guide our country. We ask that you bless our country with your wisdom, your love, and your compassion. Grant us strength and peace, especially in times of stress and uncertainty, that we may lead with humility and integrity. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I'd like to ask everyone to remain standing for a moment of silence for the individuals that have lost their lives in this horrible accident. Thank you. I'd like to recognize Senator Waters to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to announce that Senator Avard is excused for the day. And introduction of guests. Please sit. Are there any guests that we'd like to introduce? Okay, seeing none. I recognize Senator Birdsell.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to amend the Senate rules with the amendment provided in the Senate calendar.
Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted by the necessary 2/3. Okay. I recognize Senator Gray.
Thank you, Madam President. I move the adoption of the FN report.
Is there any discussion? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I do rise to oppose waiving Senate Bills 14 and 15 from review by the Finance Committee. While the fiscal notes on these bills say indeterminable, I think we would better describe them as rudimentary. We know, and the fiscal notes say so, that incarcerating more people for longer periods of time will potentially increase prosecution, incarceration, probation, and parole costs for the state, as well as county and local government costs. We would also be looking at higher medical costs on a state and county level. These increases on the county and local levels would increase property taxes, and I don't think any of us wants to do that. The Finance Committee should do its due diligence and ask DOC, the counties, and local law enforcement what they think might be more specific impact of these bills before we send them to the other body. Thank you, and I would like to ask for a roll call.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Waters?
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to objection to Senate Bill 13, not going to the Finance Committee. And I want to start by saying I really appreciate the time that we had with Chair of Senate Finance yesterday to talk over procedures. And I really believe that the senator from District 6 has very good principles in general about, what to keep, what to send on. I just thought that on this one, there were a couple of items that if we had a little more time to look at, we'd have some assurances about the potential costs for Senate Bill 13. Again, the fiscal note was rudimentary and just referred to the standard listing of potential costs for prosecution and so on and so forth. But I think that this is a little bit of a special case because of the individuals who might be prosecuted. And I know, for example, Stratford County is one of the places where a lot of people who are found to be illegal immigrants are housed, and there's a contract, and there's funding for it. But these individuals would not be covered by that, so there'd be expense to the counties. Also, there was mention of the probable necessity of creating a database related to this, and we know that can be fairly expensive. And I thought that if it was in finance, we'd have time to hear a little bit more about what that was going to really require for a new database around that. And then lastly, I just thought we might be able to take another look at the issue of the notwithstanding the interstate compact. That's important for us, the interstate compact. It covers a lot of things. And I know that we heard from, in the committee hearing, the transportation thought they didn't really think that other states in the compact would object to us carving this out and essentially saying to them that a legal license issued in your state because you want drivers who are on the road to have a license so they can be safer, which is something our law enforcement has always supported as well, that if they cross the boundary, then they're going to be arrested, potentially. And the interstate compact is important to us. It's not just license reciprocity, but it's other things, like being able to collect tolls from toll evaders. People who might go through the electronic tolling without paying. Well, through the compact, we can ask another state, really from Maine to Florida, to hold that person's registration renewal unless they've paid off our fines. And it's also important, too, for just kinds of information sharing. And we all remember the horrible tragedy a few years ago with the truck striking all the motorcyclists and all that raised up about through the interstate compact. Were we getting the kind of information about people? In one state who might have had their license suspended for OUI, and we had to change our legislation. They had to change theirs in other states. And so I'm just worried about it. I just think we could have a little more assurance to make sure, as the other states become aware of what we're doing, whether or not that might jeopardize any cooperation in the interstate compact. So I just think a stopover at finance would make sense for Senate Bill 13. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Senator Waters. Is there any further discussion? Senator Gray.
Thank you, Madam President. After the senators came to my office yesterday to discuss this, I did look at those items again. It is consistent to waive those items, as I have done in the past years for those items. These departments are not funded on an individual case-by-case basis. They are funded with a block of dollars that they have to spend. There's, again, when one of these is sent to, the state prisons or the AG's office or whatever, their standard answer is to give me how much it costs for each portion of this. And again, there's no way for me to know, no way for others to know. I did tell the two senators that they should debate it on the floor and ask if they need to believe that there should be more money, put an appropriations in, bring it to the floor today. And if they do come in with an appropriation, then we might make a difference if that appropriation passed and sending it to finance. But at this time, I see no reason to change the FN report, and I would ask the senators to support my decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gray. Is there any further discussion? The question is on the adoption of the finance report. A roll call has been requested. Is there a second? seconded by Senator Perkins Quokka. Okay. Please pay attention to the clerk.
Senator Rochefort.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator McConkey.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
No.
Senator Prentice.
No.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Innes.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Rishardi.
Yes.
Senator Fenton.
No.
Senator McHugh.
Yes.
Senator Avard is excused. Senator Rosenwald.
No.
Senator Reardon. No. Senator Murphy.
Yes.
Senator Pearl.
Yes.
Senator Sullivan.
Yes.
Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator Long.
No.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
No.
Senator Abbas.
Yes.
Senator Gannon.
Yes.
Senator Altschiller.
No.
And Senator Carson.
Yes. The roll call is 15 in favor and 8 against. The ayes have it. The finance report is adopted. Okay. We have a bill being removed from the consent calendar in HHS, Senate Bill 37, being removed by Senator Birdsell. And without objection, this bill is special ordered to the next session. Senator Birdsell moves that the consent calendar with the relevant amendments as printed in the day's calendar be adopted, and that all such bills found ought to pass be ordered to third reading. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. The consent calendar is adopted. We're now going to move on to the regular calendar. The president will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Commerce, to which was referred Senate Bill 4, an act relative to commercial property assessed clean energy and resiliency, CPACER. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 5-0. Senator Innes for the committee.
Senator Innes.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 4 ought to pass. This bill would replace the Energy Efficiency and Clean Energy District statute with a commercial property assessed clean energy and resiliency program, also known as CPACER. CPACER has existed in statute for many years, yet it's never been utilized. This bill would centralize the administration of the program with the New Hampshire Business Finance Authority and make it more accessible and more usable for those who are starting projects. It is a voluntary private lending program that communities can opt into, and it does not require an appropriation. Through the program, the energy component of a project can be taken out of the first mortgage, that is, removed from it. That reduces the upfront down payment and financing costs for the builders, thereby freeing up capital for additional projects. Given the extreme need that we have for housing in our state, it's important to enable for-profit and not-for-profit developers to construct more commercial and multifamily housing developments. And this bill addresses both of those directly. The majority of the Commerce Committee asks for your support on the motion about to pass on Senate Bill 4. Thank you, Madam President.
The bill is now on second reading. Is there any discussion? Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support and as a co-sponsor of SB 4, the CPACER legislation. Innovation and creativity, especially in the financing of development projects, whether they're residential or commercial, for-profit or nonprofit, are welcome in any economic climate, but particularly in a housing crisis. CPACE in its improved form before us is a reconfiguration of the traditional capital stack for financing a property. It takes the energy components out and puts them in a second mortgage, lengthens the amortization time, and therefore makes the early financing more affordable, a lien that will follow the property, not the developer, reducing the first mortgage obligation while preserving its priority, and potentially reducing the equity and down payment amounts required at acquisition of the project. It makes a deal more likely to be successful without any burden on municipalities, thanks to CPACER and it being taken away from the cities and towns to be the municipalities that adopt it. It's supported by banks, developers, and energy groups. It's a key tool in our work towards mitigating this housing crisis, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill.
Thank you, Senator. The question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 4. Are you ready?
Roll call.
Roll call has been requested by Senator Rochford, seconded by Senator Lang. Are you ready for the question? The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Rochford. Yes. Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator McConkey.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Prentice.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Innes.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Rishardi.
Yes.
Senator Fenton.
Yes.
Senator McHugh.
Yes.
Senator Avard is excused. Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator Reardon.
Yes.
Senator Murphy.
Yes.
Senator Pearl.
Yes.
Senator Sullivan.
Yes.
Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator Long.
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yes.
Senator Abbas.
Yes.
Senator Gannon.
Yes.
Senator Altschiller.
Yes.
Senator Carson.
Yes.
23.
The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass is adopted. The bill is ordered to third reading, and I recognize Senator Birdsell.
Sorry.
Wait, we have to wait.
Don't have anything. Oh. Thank you, Madam President. I move that the Senate, no. Thank you, Madam President. I move that Senate Bill 4, having been ordered to the third reading, be by this resolution read a third time, all titles be the same as adopted, and be ordered by the Senate to be passed at the present time in the early session.
Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No? Okay. The ayes have it. Okay. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Okay. Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Commerce, to which was referred Senate Bill 19, an act relative to hotel motel operations, having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 5-0. Senator Innes for the committee.
Senator Innes.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 19 ought to pass. This bill would repeal the requirement that hotel keepers post a notice of rental rates in hotel rooms, as well as to repeal the requirement that motel operators place signs displaying rates for rental units. Given that these requirements are antiquated and consumers can find rental rates online, the majority of the Commerce Committee asks for your support on the motion of ought to pass on Senate Bill 19. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, the question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 19. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass is adopted. The bill is ordered to third reading. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Commerce, to which was referred Senate Bill 25, an act allowing credit union members to pay members of the Board of Directors for their services as a board member. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 5-0. Senator Innes for the committee.
Senator Innes.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 25 ought to pass. This bill would allow, but not force, credit unions to pay members of their board of directors for their services. Through compensation, credit unions could retain talented individuals, attract more qualified candidates, and improve their performance. Compensation could take various forms, including monetary payments, committee fees, reimbursements for child care, health insurance, etc. 16 states have enacted similar legislation, and given the increasing complexity of the financial landscape facing credit unions as well as banks, the majority of the Commerce Committee asks for your support on the motion of ought to pass on Senate Bill 25. And I would note there were no objections to this. This bill simply creates a situation, as we see with any corporate board, where members of the board can be compensated, and the bankers had no objections either. So, thank you, Madam President.
The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Okay. The question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 25. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass is adopted, and the bill is ordered to third reading. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Commerce, to which was referred Senate Bill 50, an act establishing a committee to study the regulation of private animal boarding facilities. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 4 to 2. Senator Ricciardi for the committee.
Senator Ricciardi.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 50 ought to pass. This bill would establish a committee to study the regulation of private animal boarding facilities. Specifically, the committee would be tasked with reviewing current laws and regulations pertaining to these facilities, identifying how facilities are licensed and how incidents are reported when an animal has been harmed, lost, or killed in their care. Also identifying any gaps, if any, that may exist in current rules and regulations. To be clear, this bill would not establish new regulations. It would simply allow stakeholders and pet owners to share their stories to determine if oversight of these facilities is necessary. The majority of Commerce Committee asks for your support on the motion of ought to pass on Senate Bill 50. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any discussion? Senator Ward.
I appreciate the vote for this particular bill. It was a very unfortunate incident where somebody comes to pick up the dog and is given the brace that held the dog and just been told that the dog is lost, we can't find it. Not only that, but they already cashed the check for the boarding fee. I'm delighted that we're going to look into this and see what can we do. We don't want any more regulations, but we should know how many private kennels and what their responsibilities are. And I really appreciate the committee vote on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 50. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Okay. The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass is adopted, and the bill is ordered to third reading. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Executive Departments and Administration, to which was referred Senate Bill 30, an act proclaiming the Virginia opossum the state marsupial of New Hampshire. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with an amendment by a vote of 5 to 0. Senator Altshuler for the committee.
Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 30 ought to pass as amended. This bill proclaims the Virginia opossum the state marsupial of New Hampshire. The Virginia opossum is the only marsupial native to North America. This bill was at the request of the elementary school students from Chesterfield School and my colleague from District 10, who the committee had the pleasure of meeting at the public hearing. This bill has helped that class understand the legislative process and the importance of staying engaged in state and local politics. The Executive Departments and Administrative Committee asks for your support for the motion of ought to pass as amended.
Thank you, Senator. The question is on the adoption of the committee amendment. Senator Fenton, you'd like to also speak?
Yes, after the amendment.
Okay, thank you. We're going to get ready now to vote on the amendment. You want to wait until after the vote is taken? Okay, thank you. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee amendment is adopted. The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion or amendment? Senator Fenton?
Thank you, Madam President. Just briefly, I rise to thank my colleagues for supporting Senate Bill 30, proclaiming the Virginia opossum the state marsupial of New Hampshire. I know what a lot of you are thinking, what the heck is a marsupial? And it's not a new committee or a tax credit, that's the good news. It's actually a type of mammal that carries its young in a pouch, and it's the only one we have. And I just want to thank last year's 4th grade class at Chesterfield School, for bringing this forward and getting involved in civics. New Hampshire's about to give the opossum some well-deserved recognition. And I think we can all agree it's important to keep our youngest citizens engaged in the legislative process. And what better way than through a bill about a creature that plays dead better than most politicians during a tough vote? These students have shown real dedication, and so much so that they joined us for the bill's hearing at the ED&A committee, where they proved they are not only future voters, but possibly future legislators. And thanks to this bill and my colleague from District 11, from now on, all opossums in New Hampshire will no longer be mere Virginia opossums. They will be proudly known as New Hampshire opossums. So colleagues, let's do the right thing, not just for the opossum, but for the students who worked hard to bring this bill forward. Join me in supporting them and all New Hampshire opossums by voting to pass as amended. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. The question is on the adoption of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 30. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No? Okay, seeing no noes. The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass as amended is adopted, and the bill is ordered to third reading. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 20FN, an act relative to payment by the state portion of retirement system contributions of political subdivision employers. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 7-0. Senator Gray for the committee.
Senator Gray?
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 20FN ought to pass. This bill requires that the state pay 7.5% of the contribution to the retirement system for Group 1 teachers and Group 2 members beginning in fiscal year 2026. In accordance with the New Hampshire retirement system, the proposed change affects the pension contribution. Wait a second, I got to go back. This amendment does not change the pension requirements because it impacts the rate. The rate stays the same, and it's just changing who pays it. I would also like to speak to this. Senate Finance Committee recommends the passage of SB 20 and asks for your support, but I would like to speak to it.
Yes, please.
When we get to the finance bills, and there's an appropriation, if we send it to the House, by the time the House gets the bill, they will not be able to act on it to put it into the budget because the budget will be on its way to us. So it is tradition in the Senate that these appropriation bills be tabled. And we have a number of them here today. They will be put on the list, and we will try to fund those bills as best we can that pass the Senate. Certainly, the testimony on this bill, especially from the mayor of our second largest city, said that it will do a lot to help in the tax rate in his city, pointed out that prior legislatures have promised this money. Well, he knows very well that a prior legislators cannot guarantee what's going to happen in the future. Just ask him about his tax rate and the promises for tax assessments that have been there made by other mayors and other aldermen. So again, this bill, yes, I would like to pass it. Yes, I hope that we have the funds to do it. But what will happen is if you vote in favor of this, I will get up to make a tabling motion, and so that it can go on that list of bills that will be considered when we actually pass the budget. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any discussion? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Madam President. I too rise in support of Senate Bill 20. It will have the state pay, as my colleague from District 6 said, 7.5% of the employer cost for the public employee pension. And that is a small part of what the state did for 40 years until 2011. Having the state help pay for a part of the retirement system cost is the only immediate mechanism the state has to reduce local property taxes, because the municipalities and counties get a smaller bill. A lower bill for the employer's cost of the pension means less burden on property taxes. Now, obviously, money is fungible, but sending a lower tax bill is what we can do in Concord to lower property taxes. The state's decision to stop helping pay this cost has been incredibly expensive. In Nashua, as my colleague alluded to, the state's decision to stop paying it has cost property taxpayers $10 million a year. Between 2012 and now, Nashua taxpayers have had to pay approximately $100 million of additional property taxes because the state didn't keep its promise. I've heard arguments that having the state pick up part of the pension cost just encourages cities and towns to overpay their employees. And I can tell you that that isn't true. We have a spending cap in Nashua, and we don't even pay our teachers enough to keep them for more than a year or two. And we have a 10% vacancy on our police force. We are not overpaying our public employees. Furthermore, most of the employer cost downshifted to property taxpayers is not even for the public workforce. New information from the retirement system indicates that 80% of the employer cost is going to pay down the unfunded liability, not for current employees. As I talk to voters and residents, the number one issue I hear about is property taxes. Older residents in particular are worried about being forced to move out of the homes they've lived in, sometimes for years. We were all elected to help solve the problems Granite Staters are facing. The number one issue is cost of living, and property taxes make housing even more expensive than it already is. This bill is an opportunity to take a concrete step towards lowering the cost of living for our residents. It's the only sure means that we have in Concord to property tax relief. Our residents are counting on us, so I thank you, and I would like to ask for a roll call.
Thank you very much, Senator. The question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 20. Is there any further discussion? Senator Altschiller?
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of Senate Bill 20. It's budget season across the state, and back home, our cities and towns and school districts are making really hard choices about what and how to fund the services that make our communities run. After over 40 years of the state starting with a fulfilling promise of responsibility, we moved into a declining contribution of the cost of the retirement system we helped create, from a third to zero. That promise was broken, and we all picked up the tab at home. Seniors on fixed incomes, disabled veterans, young families, and new homeowners all picked up this downshifted tab. Our local property taxes went up because of the downshift here from Concord. When this system was created, its goal was to make the pool bigger by combining multiple civic career paths and distributing the costs more widely to make the program more affordable for our municipalities. Even though the state broke its promise and reneged on responsibilities, the bills were still due, and someone has to pay them. So the bills downshifted onto our local property taxes. I would be shocked if any one of us had not heard concerns and complaints from constituents about property taxes recently. Just one visit to any of our local budget committee meetings will yield a question about when is the state going to jump back into helping with retirement funding. The one-time payment of 7.5% we appropriated in 2021 was a really good start. Notwithstanding my colleagues' promise to table this important bill, Senate Bill 20 is a good thing. Today, we're close to going home with a little bit of good news, being able to say that help is on the way. Kudos to the Finance Committee for this unanimous vote. This property tax relief will be realized in a lower bill coming to our cities and towns, and it couldn't come at a better time. I look forward to voting yay alongside all of my colleagues today. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. The question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 20. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Seeing none, are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, my bad. A roll call has been requested, Senator Gray, and seconded by Senator Rosenwald. Are you ready for the question? Attention to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. Senator Rochefort.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator McConkey.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Prentice.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Innes.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Rishardi.
Yes.
Senator Fenton.
Yes.
Senator McHugh.
Yes.
Senator Avard's excused. Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator Reardon.
Yes.
Senator Murphy.
Yes.
Senator Pearl.
Yes.
Senator Sullivan.
Yes.
Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator Long.
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yes.
Senator Abbas.
Yes.
Senator Gannon.
Yes.
Senator Altschiller.
Yes.
Senator Carson.
Yes. Okay, the ayes have it at 23-0. The motion of ought to pass is adopted, and I'll recognize Senator Gray for a motion.
Move to table.
Okay. Are you, is there, seconded by Senator Lang. It was seconded by Senator Rosenwald, so. No, you don't need to. Okay, all right. So, are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 20 is laid on the table. Do I have to read third reading? No. Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 35FN, an act making an appropriation for a rail trail project matching funds. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 7-0. Senator Gray for the committee.
Senator Gray?
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 35FN ought to pass. This bill provides $600,000 general fund appropriation in fiscal year 2026 to the Department of Transportation to be granted to the town of Warner as a matching funds for the congestion mitigation and air quality grant to build a section of the rail trail from Warner to link it to Kentucky Village. The Senate Finance Committee recommends passage of Senate Bill 35. FN, thank you for your support.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. Okay. The question, the bill is now on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Seeing none, the question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 35. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no? No. The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass is adopted, and I recommend Senator Gray for a motion.
Move to table.
Okay. The motion before you today is to lay Senate Bill 35 on the table. The issue is non-debatable. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion of laying Senate Bill 35 on the table has passed. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 64FN, an act relative to appropriation to the Department of Justice for the purpose of funding New Hampshire child advocacy centers. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 6-0. Senator Lang for the committee.
Senator Gray? Oh. Okay, not a biggie. Senator Lang.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 64FN ought to pass. This legislation seeks to maintain the current funding level for the network of 11 child advocacy centers across our state. Child advocacy centers play a critical role in our state's multidisciplinary response to child abuse and fulfilling the requirements laid out by the Attorney General's protocols for responding to child abuse and neglect. Over the last 2 years, CACs have provided support services for over 3,100 instances of child abuse. When a child discloses abuse, they are brought to the CAC by the non-offending parent, a caregiver, or law enforcement, and they speak to a specially trained forensic interviewer. Child advocacy centers provide prosecutors with critical, legally defensible evidence in the child abuse cases through their expertly conducted forensic interviews. These expertly administered interviews are absolutely critical to the successful prosecution of child abuse cases and are absolutely imperative in our pursuit of holding offenders against children accountable. The CSCs also provide mental and behavioral support services at no cost to children and their families, ensuring that they get the care they need when they need it, which mitigates the long-term harm caused by the abuse. During the hearing, the committee members heard from advocates as well as a county attorney and members of law enforcement who consistently told us that CACs are critical to their ability to do their jobs. Senate Bill 64 represents a critical investment in our commitment to maintaining public safety and ensuring the offenders against children are held accountable here in New Hampshire. I urge my colleagues to support the Finance Committee's unanimous recommendation of the passage of Senate Bill 64FN. Thank you, Madam President.
The bill is now on second reading. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none. The question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 64. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass is adopted, and Senator Gray is recognized to make a motion.
Move to table.
Okay. What happened to that paper? Okay. The motion before you is to lay on the table. This motion is non-debatable. Okay. So, Senate Bill 64. Sorry, there's papers here everywhere. So are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Okay. Senate Bill 64 is laid. Okay. Nope, that's okay. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 113 FNA, an act making appropriations to the Department of Health and Human Services for homeless services and homeless prevention. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 6-0. Senator Birdsell for the committee.
Senator Birdsell.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 113 FNA ought to pass. This bill provides $12 million per year to sustain the existing homeless shelter beds in the state and support additional emergency shelter beds to address the drastic rise in unsheltered individuals in our state. Senate Bill 113 FNA provides $3 million per year for homeless prevention services and directs the Commissioner of DHHS to apply for state Medicaid benefits for supportive housing services with the federal government. This will allow providers to bill Medicaid for services rendered for their clients who are on Medicaid. The Senate Finance Committee recommends passage of Senate Bill 113 FNA and asks for your support. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any discussion? Senator Fenton?
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to urge passage of Senate Bill 113, and I want to thank my colleague from District 9 for bringing this bill forward. Homelessness is not just a statistic, it's a crisis that is affecting more and more families across New Hampshire. In 2023, our state had the highest percentage increase in homelessness of any state in the country, with a staggering 52% rise in people experiencing homelessness. These aren't just numbers, these are our neighbors, our veterans, our seniors, and our children. This bill is not just about building more shelters, it's about keeping people in their homes and providing support before they find themselves out on the streets. It funds essential services that help prevent homelessness, stabilize housing, and ensure that those who are struggling today do not become the homeless population of tomorrow. This issue is personal for me. I've told some of my colleagues this before. My mom was homeless as a child, and it wasn't by choice. Her father lost their job, and they had to spend their evenings in their family car under a bridge. And this bill is desperately needed so that we don't have these issues in the future. No child should have to live that way. No family should have to make those choices. This bill takes real concrete steps to address homelessness at its root. It invests in organizations that provide critical services, helps people stay in their homes, and ensures that support is available before it's too late. It also takes an important step toward expanding Medicaid coverage for supportive housing services, recognizing that the stable housing is essential to health and well-being. We have an opportunity to act today, not just to respond to homelessness, but to prevent it. Let's stand together and make sure that no family, no child, no veteran in New Hampshire has to sleep in their car or under a bridge, and I urge you all to support this bill. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Senator. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, the question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 113. Are you ready for the question? Okay. A roll call has been requested and seconded. Yes, and I don't know who's second. Okay. Okay. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Rochefort?
Yes.
Senator Lang?
Yes.
Senator McConkey?
Yes.
Senator Waters?
Yes.
Senator Prentice?
Yes.
Senator Gray?
Yes.
Senator Innes?
Yes.
Senator Ward?
Yes.
Senator Rishardi?
Yes.
Senator Fenton?
Yes.
Senator McHugh?
Yes.
Senator Avard is excused. Senator Rosenwald?
Yes.
Senator Reardon?
Yes.
Senator Murphy?
Yes.
Senator Pearl?
Yes.
Senator Sullivan?
Yes.
Senator Birdsell?
Yes.
Senator Long?
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka?
Yes.
Senator Abbas?
Yes.
Senator Gannon?
Yes.
Senator Altschiller?
Yes.
And Senator Carson.
Yes. The motion passes 23-0, and we recognize Senator Gray to make a motion.
Table?
Okay. The motion is to lay the bill on the table. There is no, it is not debatable. Are you ready for the vote? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Okay. The ayes have it, and the bill is, Senate Bill 113 is laid on the table. Okay. Yeah. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Judiciary, to which was referred Senate Bill 13 FN, an act invalidating out-of-state driver's license issued to undocumented immigrants. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with an amendment. By a vote of 3-2, Senator Gannon is for the committee.
Thank you,
Senator
Madam
Gannon.
President. Thank you. I move Senate Bill 13 ought to pass as amended. Senate Bill 13 is yet another undertaking intended at improving our safety of our residents and the roadways alike. As amended, Senate Bill 13 invalidates classes of licenses issued exclusively to undocumented immigrants in other states or licenses substantially similar to the standard with distinctions marked. Similar policies have been implemented in the state of Florida for several years. They've not caused any harm regarding interstate compacts. Information relative to public safety has been exchanged still between states, and nor have they harmed tourism. The mouse is still doing fine in Florida, the beaches are open, and it hasn't affected their economy. I ask you to look favorably upon Senate Bill 13 and support the pending motion of ought to pass as amended. Thank you, Madam President. I would like to speak on my motion.
Thank you, Senator. Please speak.
Thank you, Madam. Again, this bill, what it does is invalidates licenses issued by another state exclusively to undocumented immigrants. I was thinking of Senator Bradley a lot today. This isn't exactly the bill I wanted to present to you today. I wanted to present a bill that was going to invalidate all licenses from every state that were issued to illegal aliens. But in practical matters, there are some states, there's a list of states, there's 31 states, I'm sorry, that are just like us. They will not issue licenses to illegal aliens. Then I have a good and a naughty list like Santa. The good list has a lot of large states: California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Nevada, Utah, and Virginia, and also Washington, D.C. They issue driver's licenses that give some distinguishing feature. They'll say a word like federal limit supply only, not valid for federal ID. They have all various markings. They all differ from state to state. But 9 states, including Massachusetts, unfortunately give the exact same license, and that would present a problem on the roads when people are stopped. So unfortunately, you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. So at least I'm getting 10, and I'm not going to have a perfect bill. I won't let the good be the enemy. The enemy, you know the saying that Jeb always uses. Whatever that saying is, somebody do the fact-finding research. So I have this semi-perfect bill. So why did I start the bill? It started in the summer. We've had it before, but I heard more and more, just like the good senator, I think you're from 13, but my eyes aren't that good. Spending was the big thing, local spending, property tax. That was probably number one, but if not equal to, was, again, the public safety of having unvetted illegal aliens in our state. So what does that mean? Who are these people who will be coming in our roadways? The House Chairman of Homeland Security issued, and that was a Democrat last year, issued a report that there were 650 or more criminally illegal aliens in the country, including 15,000 convicted or charged with murder, 20,000 sexual assaults, 100,000 assault and batteries, 60,000 burglaries, 126,000 traffic and DUI offenses, 17,000 weapons charges, 6,400 kidnappings, 4,000 commercial sex offenses. And that list doesn't even include the ones they call gotaways, or people who evaded law enforcement at the border. So we know they're here in our country, and the people of New Hampshire want something done. They're shocked when I say we have a law that we won't give illegal aliens driver's licenses, but yet another state that wants to be a little more progressive is going to give them a driver's license, and then we're putting the safety of our residents in danger. So SB 13 will require, it won't require them to investigate at a road stop the immigration status. They're only, so those nine states where they show a mass license, or one of the other 8 states, if it comes up in the inquiry and they say that they don't have a legal license, that may present itself. But if they came from one of these 10 or Washington, D.C. states, they can look at the license and they'll have a list and they'll see that, oh, okay, this is one that's only issued to illegal aliens. So we won't have any road stops that they're going to say, you know, we've looked at their race or their form of speech. We don't want those type stops. This will be stops where they see those licenses. So again, I'm getting 10 out of 20 states approximately, and then the 30 states. We can't allow policies that encourage illegal immigration in our state. Every law that we put on the books will discourage illegal aliens from coming to New Hampshire. It's a proactive step for public safety and prosperity of our citizens. New Hampshire welcomes legal immigration. It needs, I come from immigrants, my grandparents were immigrants, they came here legally. We need to encourage more of that and less of the people who break the rules. Again, SB 13 simply makes clear that an out-of-state license that is issued to an undocumented illegal alien will not be recognized as legal in New Hampshire. Once again, I encourage my colleagues to support the OTP motion. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. The first order of the business is the committee amendment. Is there any discussion on the committee amendment? Senator Altshuler?
Speaking to the bill.
Okay, thank you. The question is on the adoption of the committee amendment. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee amendment is adopted. The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion or amendment? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 13. This bill, as amended. This bill brings up more questions than it answers. Law enforcement did not ask for this bill. They didn't even come out to support it. In fact, only one citizen came out to testify, and they were against it. 145 people signed in, took the time to sign in against this, and only 11 people supported it. My Republican colleagues never articulated any direct public safety danger that this bill addresses. It certainly raises a lot of questions, though. How much time will be wasted having police go through the process of invalidating legally obtained driver's licenses? What services could they have been providing at that time? How much will this new database that we know from testimony will only include 2 states, Connecticut and Delaware? How much will this new database of invalidated license cost to maintain? I don't know that we're going to find out because we just waived the FN on it. Will police need to undergo new training? How much money is this going to cost? When we consider road safety, public safety is served when people driving on our roads have legally obtained driver's licenses issued by a DMV. This bill is targeting a community of people who have already met this requirement. These are legally obtained driver's licenses. Make no mistake, and let me be very clear, the minority on the Judiciary Committee believes strongly in improving public safety on our roads. So instead of wasting our law enforcement's time invalidating legally obtained driver's licenses, what if we took a look at what other states do to keep their roads safe? Every single one of our neighbors require insurance before getting your driver's license. We don't. In fact, every state in the Northeast quadrant requires insurance for drivers. We don't. 18 states have figured out how to have undocumented immigrants' drivers properly road tested and insured. But here we are trying to invalidate the driver's licenses of duly trained and insured drivers from 2 states. The number of uninsured drivers in New Hampshire could possibly make other states want to invalidate our licenses because we're a danger. It's a crazy idea, and honestly, would probably make drivers in border states a little safer than Senate Bill 13 could ever hope to improve public safety on New Hampshire roads. Granite Staters saw through this farcical demonstration and opposed this window dressing bill 13-1. They know this doesn't make Granite Staters 1 iota safer. Like so many of the bills we're going to hear today, this bill is more concerned with grabbing a headline than solving any real problems. I respectfully ask this body to vote no on Senate Bill 13. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. The question is on the adoption of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 13. Is there any further discussion? Are you ready? Okay, a roll call has been requested and seconded. Senator Gannon and Senator Abbas. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Rochefort?
Yes.
Senator Lang?
Yes.
Senator McConkey?
Yes.
Senator Waters?
No.
Senator Prentice?
No.
Senator Gray?
Yes.
Senator Innes?
Yes.
Senator Ward?
Yes.
Senator Rishardi?
Yes.
Senator Fenton?
No.
Senator McHugh?
Yes.
Senator Avard's excused. Senator Rosenwald.
No.
Senator Reardon.
No.
Senator Murphy.
Yes.
Senator Pearl.
Yes.
Senator Sullivan.
Yes.
Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator Long.
No.
Senator Perkins Coca.
No.
Senator Abbas.
Yes.
Senator Gannon.
Yes.
Senator Altschiller.
Nope.
And Senator Carson.
Yes. Okay. The ayes have it, 15-8. The motion of ought to pass as amended is adopted, and the bill is ordered to third reading. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Judiciary, to which was referred Senate Bill 14FN, an act relative to the penalty for certain fentanyl-related offenses. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with an amendment by a vote of 3-2. Senator Gannon for the committee.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 14 ought to pass as amended. Senate Bill 14 is critical to the Granite State. As we continue to make gains in the fight against opioids and the fight for public safety, we must similarly act to deter such a crisis from happening again. As amended, Senate Bill 14 establishes mandatory minimum sentences for those guilty of possessing certain quantities of a fentanyl-class drug. Senate Bill 14 provides valuable deterrence to complement pre-existing rehabilitative measures. The intent of this policy is to prevent, not punish, use or addiction. Subsequently, any defendant who wishes to cooperate with law enforcement shall not be held to these mandatory minimum sentence standards. For the sake of continued success, I ask that you look favorably towards this bill and support the pending motion of ought to pass. Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to speak briefly on the bill.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So in the committee, we actually started with a much lower quantity for fentanyl class drugs. We went, after listening to testimony and the police came to me, we discussed quantities so we wouldn't catch in the net too many of the small fish who are really just users, but they've gotten so used to these drugs. So we have substantially raised the minimum penalty. It imposes a 3.5-year mandatory sentence for someone caught now with 20, not 5, as the police had recommended last year. So we've raised it to 20 grams, or if they have 50 grams or more, it'll be a 7-year sentence. Keeping New Hampshire the safest state in the nation means keeping drug dealers who sell them off our streets. As we know, fentanyl is increasingly dangerous and causes the majority of overdose deaths in our communities. SB 14 is another targeted attempt at stopping the proliferation of fentanyl in New Hampshire. Establishing a minimum sentence for the crime of dealing large quantities of fentanyl will be a deterrent for those bad actors that are looking for a place to do business. Last year in the House, a former convicted drug dealer stated, "Why do you think a lot of people, guys, they don't go to Maine? A lot of street guys don't go to Maine because they'll get buried in jail in Maine. If you think," and he said that if you think that a minimum mandatory doesn't work, you don't want to fix this problem. Mandatory minimums may not work for crimes of passion where an individual is acting without thoughts or consequences. Dealers, though, of large quantities of fentanyl are businessmen and businesswomen. It's about the money to them, and they do think about the consequences. They want to stay in business, and they will build their business where jail time is not an issue. Passage of SB 14 will ensure that those convicted of dealing in large amounts of fentanyl will do mandatory jail time. Full stop, no way out, no pass and go. Each dealer is taken out of the communities. So right away, we're guaranteed of one thing. We've taken a drug dealer who sells off the streets. They won't be selling there tomorrow or in the near future. I encourage my colleagues to support the ought to pass motion as amended. Thank you, Madam President. I also want to point to 2 other things I was thinking of. This will result in equitable sentencing. Rather than have judges in different areas, everyone's going to know right away. There won't be anything. Poorer people, people of different races, will now, they'll have the same exact sentencing as anyone else. Studies have shown also that those who show those convicted of mandatory minimums have lower recidivism by the U.S. Sentencing Commission. Also, I'd like to point out the way I look at it is like a stool. Senator Pearl, you probably have a 3-legged stool somewhere out in that barn of yours. We do want to rehabilitate people. That's one leg of the stool. We also want to take them off the street And we also, I have 3 people in my district, a mother in Fremont who approached me last year before we had this bill. This summer, a woman came to me and sat down at the dump. We opened up the back of the tailgate. She told me the same story. Her son had been sold fentanyl. The person who sold them fentanyl did not receive any jail time. I have the same story in Seabrook, and I'm sure all of you have stories of people who've died from fentanyl, and the people have not always got any sentences at all. So we want to put the word out that New Hampshire is not the place to sell fentanyl. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. The question is on the adoption of the committee amendment. Are you ready for the question? Okay, we're not there yet. Senator Perkins Coca.
I'll defer my comments to the motion about to pass as amended.
Okay. So, Senator, do you want to roll call the amendment or the bill as amended? Okay, thank you. The question is on the adoption of the committee amendment. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Okay. The ayes have it, and the committee amendment is adopted. The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion or amendment? Senator Perkins Coca.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to speak in opposition of SB 14 as amended. As was made clear in committee, there is no daylight between us as colleagues on wanting to protect our communities from fentanyl. We believe, as you do, in enforcing our laws. We believe in using our laws to keep fentanyl out of our state. But to do this, and especially to do it at the lowest cost to our taxpayers, we should be pursuing the most effective enforcement of our laws. The fact is, mandatory minimums are not effective. It is simply a show policy that will have massive consequences. This bill takes the power out of the hands of judges and is incredibly expensive. Mandating longer sentences is mandating a higher bill for New Hampshire, and it will not be money well spent. My colleague's main argument for this bill is deterrence. In fact, my colleague from District 23 just made it. Yet they have not brought one study that shows mandatory minimums are effective at deterring crime. My colleague from District 24 has raised in committee that Florida has seen a 50% spike in crime since implementing mandatory minimum sentencing. A 50-state study found no relationship between the rate of crime and longer sentences. We are left with what should be an obvious choice: legislate based on cold, hard data, or legislate for headlines. As senators, I should think we would be legislating on the real data, and that's why I cannot support this bill. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. The question is on the adoption of ought to pass as amended. The chair will recognize Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of the committee's recommendation of ought to pass. So just to clarify, if you look at the RSA, what would invoke this mandatory minimum, it's not just simple possession, it's possession with intent to distribute. Or if you're selling it, manufacturing, there's other things, but simple possession actually would be outside this. Now, 20 grams of fentanyl is 10,000 lethal doses. That is not for personal use. That's what this is applying to. If you have that much fentanyl on you, you can kill up to 10,000 people. That's when the mandatory sentence would apply. I think that's a good headline to send to the people that are selling drugs and the people that are distributing them throughout the state, whether they're selling drugs so they want to support their own habit, they're still contributing to the problem we have with the fentanyl crisis in this state, which is not made in New Hampshire, it's brought here and then distributed. And it's causing a lot of collateral effects, a lot of other crimes relate to substance abuse. But again, you have to have that large quantity of fentanyl in your possession with the intent to distribute it. All right? And intent can be interpreted several different ways. It's more of a totality of circumstances. But if you're going to possess the intent to distribute that much fentanyl, I think it's fair to take into consideration that they're going to distribute that to other people, and we're not going to tolerate that in this state. And if you're going to do that, you're going to face a harsh penalty. And I think that's a great headline for the people dealing drugs that hopefully they read the paper or watch the news. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. The question is on the adoption of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 14. Yes, I know. Senator Rosenwald.
President, I rise to oppose this motion, and I do so in the belief that I'm the only member of the Senate who has a close relative that is a fentanyl addict. The rest of you are lucky. My family wakes up every day not knowing whether this young woman who is homeless will still be alive. Her addiction has overpowered everything else in her life, including relationships with her own family. If one dealer is off the street, she will find another. That is how powerful her addiction is. What she needs is treatment, housing, the ability to be connected to services. Spending funds to incarcerate more people will come at the expense, I know it will, of treatment, and in some cases will serve to increase property taxes as well. None of this will help her because another dealer will always pop up. That's how strong this addiction is. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Senator. The question is on the adoption of ought to pass as amended. Are you ready for the question?
Roll call.
A roll call has been requested by Senator Gannon, seconded by Senator Abbas. Okay. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Rochefort?
Yes.
Senator Lang?
Yes.
Senator McConkey?
Yes.
Senator Waters?
No.
Senator Prentice?
No.
Senator Gray?
Yes.
Senator Innes?
Yes.
Senator Ward?
Yes.
Senator Rishardi?
Yes.
Senator Fenton?
No.
Senator McHugh?
Yes.
Senator Avard is excused. Senator Rosenwald?
No.
Senator Reardon?
No.
Senator Murphy?
Yes.
Senator Pearl?
Yes.
Senator Sullivan?
Yes.
Senator Birdsell?
Yes.
Senator Long?
No.
Senator Perkins Quokka?
No.
Senator Abbas?
Yes.
Senator Gannon?
Yes.
Senator Altschiller?
No.
And Senator Carson.
Yes. The ayes have it, 15 to 8. The motion of ought to pass as amended is adopted, and the bill is ordered to third reading. Senator Reardon.
Madam President, I'd like to introduce some guests in the gallery that are here from the Rock NH Policy and Advocacy Program, run by the great folks at the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, who are here on their State House visit today and spent some time with Senator Lang earlier today. Welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Judiciary, to which was referred Senate Bill 15 FN, an act relative to establishing a mandatory minimum sentence for the crime of distribution of controlled drug with death resulting. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with an amendment by a vote of 3 to 2. Senator Abbas for the committee.
Senator
Thank you, Madam
Abbas.
President. I move Senate Bill 115 ought to pass as amended. Senate Bill 115 establishes a mandatory minimum sentence for the manufacturing, distribution, or sale of a fentanyl-class drug with a death resulting. Senate Bill 15 ensures that courts shall not assign a sentence of less than 10 years for those strictly liable for the death resulting from the injection, or inhaling of a substance that they distributed. In the interest of safety and effective policy, it is appropriate to implement this supply-oriented measure alongside our rehabilitative demand-oriented measures. I ask that you support Senate Bill 115 and join me in voting for the pending motion ought to pass as amended. Thank you, Madam President. If I may speak further. The committee did adopt an amendment, but I'm going to ask that we vote that amendment down. Amendment 0142S is what the committee adopted, because I believe my friend from District 1 has I think, a better amendment that I hope we can consider. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. I'd like to take a 3-minute recess. The Senate will come out of recess. We are currently discussing Senate Bill 15, and we are on second reading, and the first order of the business is the committee amendment. Is there any discussion on the committee amendment? Okay. The question is on the adoption of the committee amendment. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. No. Okay. The noes have it, and the amendment fails. The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion or amendment? Senator Rochford.
Thank you, Madam President. So thank you for voting down the previous amendment that came out of committee. I think you've got a floor amendment that should be at your seats, and if not, I think you're getting it right now. But yes, it's 0165S. And I know we're all anxious to get on to debate this full bill with a lot of vigor and passion, but I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of some of the things that we're going to be talking about. We've all been affected either directly or indirectly by the fentanyl crisis in New Hampshire. And it's been horrible. We want to acknowledge how bad it is. But one of the things that gets lost sometimes in this debate and in this situation is that fentanyl is an FDA-approved drug. It's been shown to be safe and effective. It's used clinically in everything from anesthesia to treating chronic pain in hospice cancer patients. So in looking at the previous committee amendment, what I wanted to make sure that we did is provide clarity for those folks that are legally dispensing and using and distributing fentanyl. And what the amendment does is it provides some protection for those where a situation where fentanyl may be legally prescribed and dispensed or distributed and then subsequently unwittingly being diverted, whether it be off an ambulance, out of a ER, out of a pharmacy, and then ultimately resulting in a death. So you'll see the amendment here. It will ensure that the healthcare providers that are legitimately using clinical fentanyl are not subject to criminal prosecution for carrying out the duties of their job. And the specifics of that are found in line 10 and 11, where it actually starts on line 9. Any person who manufactures, sells, or dispenses a fentanyl class drug, including any adulterants or diluents in violation of RSA 318B2. And that's how this amendment differs from the committee amendment. So I'm asking you to support the amendment so we can get on with the full debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. The question is on the adoption of ought to pass as amended. Oh, no, excuse me, is on floor amendment 0165S. Are there any questions on the proposed amendment? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. The ayes have it. The question is on the adoption of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 15. Is there any further discussion or amendment? Senator Reardon and then Senator Sullivan. You want to speak as well? And add this.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to my colleague from District 1 for clarifying that for us. There's no denying that the fentanyl epidemic is a scourge in our state. Every person in this room acknowledges that something needs to be done. Nearly everyone has a personal story of a loved one, friend, or a community member who has suffered from addiction, and unfortunately, we can probably all identify somebody who has died from it. All are unique, heartbreaking stories, mostly with one common element, fentanyl, and we want to send a strong message to those who manufacture and distribute fentanyl that they should be punished harshly. We believe that. All those unique stories originate from sometimes a genuinely bad actor, the one that owns a pill press, who may not even do drugs, but makes a lot of money off people that do, to the other extreme, kids at a party that decide that party will be better if they tried that pill. Same result, far different motivations, a business venture for one defendant, a tragic mistake for the other. That's what's at stake here. In my personal experience, in that moment that you receive that news and the incredible pain that comes with that, I want the worst for the person responsible for that. That's my gut reaction before I know any facts at all. But what's at stake in the bill and its language is the sentencing process. Mandatory minimums reduce the discretion of judges when it comes to sentencing, give prosecutors a lot of leverage, and have no link to reducing crime. The only issue where my colleagues and I disagree is who has the say in determining what that sentence of that perpetrator is. I think it should be the judge who has listened to all of the evidence, who has assessed the credibility of everyone involved, and with the depth of their professional experience when they're charged with the sentencing. And I want that sentencing to be lengthy in the right cases and when the facts support it. And I'm sure there's plenty of instances where it does. We need to be focused on helping people to recover, providing them with a helping hand, not taking away judicial power and discretion and forcing people into sentences that may not be indicative of their involvement. I encourage my colleagues to vote down the ought to pass motion.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a question for my colleague from District 22.
Will you take the question, Senator?
Yes. Thank you for taking the question. My concern is around the person that is using drugs with another person and one of them dies. It may have come in your committee, but are you aware of any situation where someone was prosecuted for the death of a person where they did not sell or distribute it in that way? They were just both using the substances together.
Thank you for your question. So I actually asked, there was a prosecutor from Hillsborough County that came and testified, and I asked him the question about, two people on a park bench where they're both using drugs, and person A gives it to person B, and person B overdoses. Those type of cases come up. Although a technical reading of the law may look at it that it could fall under this, he's never had a case prosecuted under those facts. It is a difficult burden of proof to reach in this case. These are cash transactions. There's not always cash exchanged. Sometimes there's other monetary things that are done. I'm willing to get into that. But what I'm getting at is one of the people have died. So it's very difficult for them to show who actually introduced the drugs to this situation. There's not often physical evidence beyond what's right in front of them. So he's never had a case prosecuted like that. That's not how this is generally going to be prosecuted. Normally, to get to that point, you're going to need to have, whether it's text messages exchanged, whether the person tells you where they bought it from. If it's more than one person, they can say, oh, well, this is where we got it from. And also, just to clarify, if someone does overdose and you bring them to the hospital, there are certain exclusionary rules that apply, evidentiary rules that we don't use that evidence against the person. They have essentially immunity in that situation.
Thank you for the answer. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Waters for a question of?
Senator from District 15?
Yes, if she takes the question.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking my question. I had a question around Section 318, B2, 1 and 1A. And my concern here is that you gave the example of someone who might be at a party and give somebody a pill. And 318B2.1 says that just dispensing it would make you liable to potential life in prison, whether or not you knew that fentanyl was in it. Whereas 1A says you represent something to have a controlled substance, whether it's in there or not. So what I'm concerned about here is that in your example of someone who has some pills at a party and gives it to someone and the person dies, horrible, but they didn't know there was fentanyl in there, and maybe they bought it and somebody had said, no, it doesn't. So I guess, is that the person who would then be liable potentially for a life sentence, life in prison?
Thank you for the question, Senator Waters. The testimony that we received was from a Hillsborough County prosecutor who wasn't there on behalf of Hillsborough County. He was there on his own. He said that they didn't have a whole lot of experience with these cases, that only 5 in the last 5 years that they had even brought. But this bill imposes strict liability, an easier standard to meet than previously in the law. And I think that it's highly likely that a text message where somebody agrees that they're going to go get some pills for the party, or it could be far worse. It could be their regular dealer. The spectrum is really broad. All end up in the same place, which is at the discretion of a prosecutor in a county office that may or may not have the experience. And my argument is that a judge who unfortunately sees way too many of these cases and the circumstances is the better person to be making the decision in that case.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Lang for a question of?
Senator from District 22.
Will you take the question, Senator?
Yes.
Thank you. So the intent of this bill is to deal with the worst criminals who are preying upon our addicted population, and that those actions that they take result in the death of a New Hampshire citizen, and to impose harsh sanctions against them?
Thank you for the question. It is, because the harm, the potential of someone dying from using illegal drugs in this mandatory sentence would only apply to fentanyl. That is a well-known risk in the behavior they're engaging in, and if someone dies of the very harm that they know exists, that is a foreseeable consequence of what they're doing. And then when the person dies, oh, well, I didn't want them to die. I mean, we have other laws that we have prison sentence for. Someone drinks and drives, they just get arrested for a DUI, they might not go to jail. But if you're drinking and driving, you're over the limit and you kill someone, harsher sentence. In this case, they know what they're doing, could kill someone. Someone actually does die from their conduct. Yes, that is what we're looking to address with this.
Thank you.
Senator Abbas, you wanted to speak? You're recognized.
Yes. Thank you, Madam President. And as you can tell, I rise in support of the ought to pass as amended motion. As I said, if someone's handing out fentanyl, if I handed out fentanyl to everyone in this room and someone died of an overdose, would I really be surprised? But I didn't mean it for it to happen. I didn't know that would I was hoping it wouldn't. But what are we doing here? They're engaging in behavior that they know can kill someone, then they kill someone, someone dies from their behavior. I think that to me, they deserve a mandatory sentence. In particularly the strict liability law, that's already the existing law. The potential of a life sentence, already the existing law. The carve out of this as amended, what it does is for fentanyl, that drug particularly, if that causes the death of someone, that will have a mandatory sentence. We distinguish it from the other drugs because what we're dealing with. And I just feel that if someone's going to keep engaging in this behavior, I've lost friends to this, people I've grown up with, I've seen what it can do. You know, one of my good friends from high school, one of the saddest days of my life, I went to his funeral service. He died of a fentanyl overdose. The time his fiance, it was actually her due date to give birth to his son. So it was really, this is a difficult situation. But the person who sold him those drugs knew that he could die from using it, did it anyway, he used it, and he died. I'm not saying that's first-degree murder, but tell me the difference here. You're still causing the death of someone. And I think the families in this state, we don't want to lose anyone else. We want to limit that behavior. And if someone's going to continue doing that, there's going to be stiff consequences. So please join me, support the committee's recommendation of ought to pass as amended. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator. Senator Perkins-Coker for a question.
A question of my colleague from District 15, please. We've heard some sad stories on the floor today, and I think there's obviously an intent for who this bill is supposed to legislate. Does this bill only pick up people who knowingly manufacture, sell, or dispense in its plain language?
It does not, and it doesn't prevent a judge in the state of New Hampshire from giving a sentence of 10 plus. This bill swoops up everybody that may have sold fentanyl to somebody knowingly or unknowingly. In my personal experience, the cases, they did not know it was fentanyl. in that case.
Thank you.
Senator Gannon for a question.
Question from my friend from District 22. Thank you for taking my question, Senator. Is this bill about deterrence? Do we need to make everyone think twice about selling or dispensing shared drugs? So again, is this about deterrence?
Thank you for the question. It is. The whole point of having penalties in the first place is to deter the behavior. And again, I think when you cause the death of someone, that's a behavior we actually have a public interest in deterring. We talk a lot about public safety. Well, causing the death of someone, that's pretty dangerous to me.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator Waters to speak.
Thank you, Madam President. So in light of the answer to my question to the senator from District 15, I do think we have an issue here that needs to be addressed. I've heard from my colleagues from District 2 and from District 22, and I understand the passion here that they mentioned drug dealers, they mentioned intent, they mentioned, making money off of, and so on and so forth. And I understand the need for enforcement here, and this is a horrible drug. But it is quite clear from the statutes referenced here that dispensing, not selling, just means giving somebody a pill. And on Section 1 there, even if you don't know or don't represent it as having fentanyl in it, here under this bill, you could be sent to prison for life. I don't really think that's the intent of the sponsors of this legislation. I think that what they're trying to do is to go after the people who are the main suppliers, the dealers, the people who are creating the scourge in our society, not somebody who, horrible thing, but shares some pills or goes to a party. And so I think there's a problem here, because we hear about intent, we hear about sales, we hear about this and so on, but is it really justice if it includes somebody with a potential life sentence who has no knowledge of what they're giving someone when they give them a pill? Horrible thing to do, but to say that's life imprisonment, I don't think is what justice means. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gannon has a question for?
One more question for the senator from District 22.
Will you take the question, Senator?
Yes. Thank you, Senator. Your criminal knowledge far exceeds mine. So as I understand it, we already have strict liability for death resulting cases, right?
That's correct.
And we're not changing that standard here, are we?
No, we're not.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify that, it's the existing law today. The mandatory sentence is what we are changing. And that's all that this is going to do, for fentanyl only.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Birdsell to speak.
Thank you, Madam President. According to the New Hampshire Medical Examiner's Office in 2024, over 74% of the drug deaths in New Hampshire were due to fentanyl. Of all the cases that the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Lab had to analyze last year, fentanyl cases were 41% higher than any other of the controlled drug cases. And this is a real problem. Granite Staters are dying. If even one person in our state dies because of fentanyl, it's a tragedy, and I think it demands our attention. Strong laws against these drug trafficking crimes will make our communities safer and reduce overdose deaths in our state. Dealers know that fentanyl can be deadly, and they must face harsh consequences here in New Hampshire. And adding to that, where is the responsibility? Whether you mean to or you don't, there is a death. They killed someone. Do they not deserve? And in the case of District 23's constituent, his constituent's child was killed, and the drug dealer is still walking around. How is that fair to that family? So, according to the United States Sentencing Commission, drug trafficking offenders convicted of an offense carrying a drug mandatory minimum penalty had a lower recidivism rate than those who did not have a mandatory minimum sentence. And a former drug dealer that testified last year in the House said, "We need mandatory minimums. You want to scare away a drug dealer? This is an ex-drug dealer you're looking at. You're going to scare them with mandatory minimums." And for that, I hope that we can all vote for Senate Bill 15. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Pearl has a question of.
Thank you, Madam President. The member from District 22.
Will you accept the question?
Yes. I just want to know, could you clarify, the current sentence requirements include the possibility of a life sentence. This increases the minimum sentence when someone is found guilty and responsible for a fentanyl overdose, a fatal fentanyl overdose, to 10 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Senator Fenton has a question.
Thank you, Madam President, of my colleague from District 15.
Will you take the question?
I'm just looking through some of the testimony on these bills, and we had someone testify saying New Hampshire had 427 overdoses in 2022, and in 2024 that figure fell to 199. So that was cut well in half, and we don't have this bill in place yet. So I'm curious, how are these overdoses falling without this bill we're talking about in place yet?
I would like to think it's the actions that we have taken to provide people with recovery and substance abuse treatment options and housing them. And I just want to reiterate, with this bill or without this bill, a judge is going to mete out a sentence that's commensurate with the facts that are before them. So I hope those rates continue to go down as we find more options for people who are addicted. But this bill doesn't change the number of people using fentanyl today. I don't think it deters anybody from using fentanyl, and it gives a judge the discretion, not a charging prosecutor. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 15 as amended? Okay. Okay, a roll call has been requested and seconded. Senator Lang. And Birdsell. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Rochefort?
Yes.
Senator Lang?
Yes.
Senator McConkey?
Yes.
Senator Waters?
No.
Senator Prentice?
No.
Senator Gray?
Yes.
Senator Innes?
Yes.
Senator Ward?
Yes.
Senator Rishardi?
Yes.
Senator Fenton?
No.
Senator McHugh?
No.
Senator Avard is excused.
He said no. Senator McHugh said
Oh, he did?
yes.
Thank you. Senator Rosenwald?
No.
Senator Reardon?
No.
Senator Murphy?
Yes.
Senator Pearl?
Yes.
Senator Sullivan?
Yes.
Senator Birdsell?
Yes.
Senator Long?
No.
Senator Perkins Quokka?
No.
Senator Abbas?
Yes.
Senator Gannon?
Yes.
Senator Altschiller?
No.
How did I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? And then Senator Carson?
Yes. Okay. The ayes have it, 14 to 9. The motion ought to pass as amended is adopted in order to third reading. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Judiciary, to which was referred Senate Bill 62, an act relative to law enforcement participation in a federal immigration program. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 3 to 2. Senator Abbas for the committee.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 62 ought to pass. Senate Bill 62 is an enabling act providing that law enforcement agencies and entities alike may voluntarily enter Section 287G agreements with the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. Section 287G agreements provide law enforcement officials with valuable training in conjunction with federal authorities, while also enabling greater success in the pursuit and detention of violent criminals. It is in the best interest of all granted staters. I ask you to support the pending motion ought to pass. Thank you, Madam President. If I may speak further. So this is enabling legislation, but also it really prohibits having a blanket policy preventing any type of 287G agreement between local law enforcement and the federal government. I understand that when there is joint law enforcement operations, it's quite common, the practice, to have some type of memorandum of understanding or some agreement on how those operations will be conducted. To have this policy in place that prevents you from even having that understanding or coming to that agreement, I think is not a good practice, especially when you have a federal law enforcement agency engaging in operations, in the state. So to completely prevent that without any, on a universal level, I think is a bad policy. It obstructs federal law enforcement operations, but also it's certainly not promoting public safety in any meaningful way. In fact, it goes against public safety. So please join me and support the committee's recommendation of ought to pass. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any discussion? Senator Perkins-Coker.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in opposition to SB 62. Section 287G is a program to deputize local, county, and or state law enforcement or Department of Corrections for the purposes of doing ICE's job, potentially at the local taxpayer's cost. 21 states are currently participating in Section 287G programs. There is nothing stopping any New Hampshire agency from applying for program training right now. There was no testimony or documentation to show any financial compensation to participating agencies of the state. The MOUs that would have been entered into without any input or approval from any executives who have to oversee the related budgets, like county commissioners, town councils, and select boards, would be unable to direct their sheriff offices and local law enforcement from entering into these MOUs when they are the ones that have to craft the budgets. SB 62 strips public agencies and executives from the checks and balances and gives police departments and correctional facilities authority to enter into agreements with ICE without due compensation to address the taxpayers' needs. SB 62 is being described as enabling legislation. However, there are currently no pre-existing preclusions now or on the horizon. This legislation will just raise our local taxpayers' bills, which they are picking up already for the state.
For discussion. Okay, seeing none. The question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 62. A roll call has been requested by Senator Abbas and seconded by Senator Gannon. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Rochefort?
Yes.
Senator Lane?
Yes.
Senator McConkey?
Yes.
Senator Waters?
No.
Senator Prentice?
No.
Senator Gray?
Yes.
Senator Innes?
Yes.
Senator Ward?
Yes.
Senator Rishardi?
Yes.
Senator Fenton?
No.
Senator McGue?
Yes.
Senator Avard's excused. Senator Rosenwald?
No.
Senator Reardon?
No.
Senator Murphy?
Yes.
Senator Pearl?
Yes.
Senator Sullivan?
Yes.
Senator Birdsell?
Yes.
Senator Long?
No.
Senator Perkins-Coker?
No.
Senator Abbas?
Yes.
Senator Gannon?
Yes.
Senator Altschiller?
No.
And Senator Carson?
Yes. The ayes have it, 15-8. The motion of ought to pass is adopted, and the bill is ordered to third reading. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Judiciary, to which was referred Senate Bill 71FN, an act relative to cooperation with federal immigration authorities. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 3-2. Senator Gannon for the committee.
Senator Gannon.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 71 ought to pass. Senate Bill 71, the Anti-Sanctuary City Act, takes important steps to improve public safety while supporting our local and federal law enforcement agencies. This bill ensures that our federal authorities are enabled to pursue investigations and suspects free of obstruction or impediments from government entities or subdivisions. Senate Bill 71 further provides sufficient means to punish any persistent efforts to hamper federal law enforcement following the passage of the act. In the interest of public safety, I ask you to support the pending motion upon Senate Bill 71. Thank you, Madam President, and I wish to speak briefly on the bill.
Okay, the bill is now on second reading, and Senator Gannon, you are recognized to speak.
I'll cut it short because we've already talked about the disaster border problems, the 700,000 known criminals in our country, not to mention the gotaways. But some illegal aliens have been welcomed into communities. I mentioned welcoming ordinances that have been used in Lebanon, Hanover. Lebanon in 2020, they came out, and part of their ordinance was to prohibit police from cooperating with U.S. immigration and custom officials. Lebanon had a similar ordinance, and it's not the fact that whether they enforced it at all, it's the fact that it existed at all is the problem. No agent or agency of the City of Lebanon, including law enforcement, it says, shall participate in immigration enforcement actions. The law enforcement agencies shall not permit the Federal Immigration Authority to have access to a person being detained, use the facility to interrogate. They're not even allowed to ask them, geez, when are you releasing them? They can't give them court dates, whereabouts, residence. So we in New Hampshire do not want sanctuary cities because they're going to bring in an element we don't want. We want public safety, and we feel that having sanctuary cities policies, allowing sanctuary cities will be bad for the state. During the January 17th confirmation of the Director of Homeland Security, Senator Hassan even stated, we recently in New Hampshire have seen a drastic increase in unauthorized crossing at the northern border. Referring to her trip to the northern border, she said, it is clear that we need more support, and there is a real concern in New Hampshire, along with the northern border, that we strengthen the border and have resources we need. According to Customs Border Patrol, 676 doses of fentanyl were seized at the northern border. 240,000 doses of fentanyl would be enough to kill every single resident of the 3 largest cities in New Hampshire, Manchester, Nashua, and Concord. New Hampshire does not need to make it easier for criminal aliens to use our communities as shelters here, such as Rye last year. We had the gentleman who was the mass murderer from Brazil who had killed 12 people, lived in Merrimack, was commuting through my district every day to get to his work. Allowing sanctuary policies is an advertisement for them to do just such criminal activity. SB 71 is proactive. It sends the message New Hampshire is not open to illegal aliens. Sanctuary city policies harm the residents of New Hampshire. In one day last week, and these people are fluid and they can come here, ICE arrested in one day 308 serious criminal aliens, some of them murderers, some of them rapists, and some of them had even recently raped a child. Board Czar Tom Homan recently stated that the sanctuary cities are going to get exactly what they don't want: more agents in the communities, more arrested, more collateral arrests. The question we need to ask is, why wouldn't people want public safety threats out of their communities? When there are no sanctuary cities, less women and children will be sex trafficked, less residents will die of fentanyl overdoses, and less illegal aliens will die making the terrible journey from the north or the south. It's our responsibility to the residents of New Hampshire to make it known that the only immigration that New Hampshire welcomes is legal immigration. We can do that by prohibiting sanctuary cities. For those reasons, I ask my colleagues to support the motion of OTP on 71. Thank you, Madam President.
The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Senator Prentice. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
Thank you, Madam President. I thought that Groundhog Day was in February, but it looks like we're back here today, and that Senator Gannon continues to point to the city of Lebanon as being a haven for illegal citizens or those who are non-citizens who are legally in this country, and that they are raining down crime on our city. I'm not going to speak for Hanover because I don't live in Hanover. I don't have their policy at hand, and I think it's just important to point out, and I confirmed with our city manager, and I said this when we talked about this last year, and I'll say it again, but now I have the numbers. So in 5 years since this policy was adopted, a welcoming Lebanon ordinance, we've had 3 cases where law enforcement has arrested an individual that did not have citizenship. They had all committed crimes, and they were prosecuted and pushed through the process. We did not open the doors and set them free. If you are a criminal, if you are arrested, you are brought up on a criminal charge, then you are moved through the system. So any assertion that we are welcoming and harboring has just not played out in the numbers. That's number one that I'd like to say. Number two is I think that it's really important for us, because I hear us all talk about wanting safer, secure communities where, like when Phoebe was, little, that she could go out and, ride, although I never let her ride her bike because I was always worried that she'd fall off of it and get a head injury, but she could play in the neighborhood with other children and walk to school and go down to the local Dunkin' Donuts with her friends. I didn't have to worry about her because we focused on a safe, secure community. But times have changed. We don't have enough law enforcement officials. We don't have enough firefighters. We are losing emergency medical technicians. We know we have a deficit. We have a number of state police openings who often are the ones that are backing up the local law enforcement officials as they are addressing these cases, whether someone is legal or they are illegal. We don't have the means right now in a number of our communities to actually provide the safety and security that my family felt when my daughter was small. Yesterday, mid-morning, the city of Lebanon, we're a city. We might only have like 13,000 people, but we are one of 13 cities in this state. Our fire department had 3 medical calls happening at the same time. We only have 2 ambulances that we staff. We have 2 stations, 2 ambulances. So they were covering those 2 calls. They had the town of Hanover come in to cover the 3rd call, and then there was a fire. So the fire chief and the deputy chief went with a fire extinguisher, a fire truck, a fire extinguisher. They went to that fire to maintain what they could till they could get mutual aid. And guess what? Mutual aid was not readily available. There was no one to come. They did eventually make it there within 10 minutes. And I just want to ask everybody to consider, what's the basic safety and security that we should be focusing on? Investments in our local police, fire, and emergency medical services, and also, I'm pleased to be working with other senators, and I think, Senator Gannon, you're the one that is sponsoring the bill to bring an incentive to bring more state troopers, am I correct, into the pipeline? I agree with you on that. That's where I think we should be focusing. So I'll be looking forward to seeing what Puxatawny Phil says in February, but for now, I would just like to share the data from the City of Lebanon. I'm sorry that we're here talking about this again, and ask us all to focus on the basic safety, the basic public safety legs in our community. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. And we'll find out what Puxatawny Phil has to say on Sunday, because it will be February 2nd. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all the senators that when you're debating, you don't refer to the other senator by their name. You refer to them by their district. I know we're a little rusty because we're just getting back to work, but please, that is a courtesy, and I'm to observe that courtesy. Okay, we have some additional speakers. The question is, the bill is in on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Senator Reardon.
Madam President, New Hampshire already requires law enforcement to cooperate. We heard no instances or testimony that that wasn't happening. There are no pro-crime cities or towns in New Hampshire, and anyone who would harbor a criminal is chargeable, whether that person is a citizen or a non-citizen. We all want safe communities and have laws that enable law enforcement to act. Heaven forbid we have a Laken Riley incident in our communities. We all dread a violent criminal event by citizens or non-citizens. This bill does not do anything to change that, to change what's already being done and able to do by our law enforcement. And the bill ultimately purports the possibility that a wanted criminal would be released into our community if there was a detainer on that individual. I think that's unfair to New Hampshire law enforcement community. In my district, and from what I hear also in Lebanon, cities and towns do not house detainees of any kind. They're brought to our county jails. And it's the process in most cities and towns. The Merrimack County Jail is an exceptionally well-run institution with trained professionals that hold dozens of federal inmates every single day. And they do it by contract with the Federal Marshals Service, and they're compensated by that agreement. They are professionals who run that institution according to the laws of the state of New Hampshire, and ICE is notified as a standard procedure of any individual held in our county jails that has a detainer that is pending relief because New Hampshire state law requires it. The county has no authority to hold a detainee beyond their sentence. That's why ICE is notified in advance. The Association of Counties sent a letter to our committee and sent another alert yesterday informing the committee that as drafted, this bill would require county government to assume the costs for housing these individuals beyond their current authority. Housing, food, clothes, hygiene products, medical treatment would all fall on the county and likely be the responsibility of the county taxpayer, clear violation of 28A. As a matter of clarification, there is no county in New Hampshire that has a sanctuary policy. There's no such thing as a sanctuary county. SB 71 would require county correctional officers to comply with an ICE detainer, and we know that that notification is already happening. This puts county facilities in a really vulnerable position. They are risking litigation and liability for holding somebody beyond federal law, and that's why they notify ICE. And if that happens, surely a lawsuit will ensure. They only have the ability to hold on state charges, not detainer charges, and this bill does nothing to change that standard. I'd conclude that this bill does not make our communities safer. Local, state, and county corrections and law enforcement have the authority they need and are already closely cooperating with federal authorities. I would urge my colleagues to vote no on the ought to pass motion.
Thank you, Senator. The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Senator Abbas.
Madam President, I rise in support of the motion of ought to pass. Public safety, and I know there's a narrative that some state that there is no public safety concern. Right in the state beneath us, our neighbor, Massachusetts, I'm going to give you an example of a sanctuary city policy just going completely afoul. There was a person who was an illegal immigrant. They're not a non-citizen. They're in this country illegally. They're an illegal immigrant. And they were charged with raping an adult who had developmental disabilities. And ICE wanted to take that person into custody. So rather than let ICE detain that sexual predator, because of the sanctuary policy, that person was then released into the public. I will give ICE some credit. A few months later, they were able to track this person down, but I would have felt a lot safer, and I think we all could agree, if that person just remained in custody and ICE did their job. But having this blanket policy that they're going to ignore the ICE detainer request, that is what happens when you have these policies. You can have a terrorist in your custody at the state level, but you're going to release that person because of a sanctuary policy. That completely contradicts any public safety provision, and it actually creates, I think it makes the state less safe. And I heard the term again, non-citizens. If you're here legally and you're a non-citizen, you're welcomed in every single community in the state. That applies to every town in the state, every city. Legal immigrants, people who come to this country legally, who have legal status, are welcomed in this state. That's what we support here in New Hampshire. We do not support illegal immigration. And people keep talking about the costs. First of all, the cost. Law enforcement, exercising their duties, doing their job, that's what their job is to enforce laws and maintain public safety. That's what they do at their best. And we want to talk about the expense. We have another great example, our good friends right south of us, Massachusetts. They love to brag about their sanctuary policies. Well, they spent over $1 billion trying to manage their sanctuary policies. They had such a large influx of illegal immigrants come to their state, and to the point that they had to have executive orders where they were forcing hotels to provide housing for all of the illegal immigrants. There was nowhere for everyone to stay. They were at one point encouraging other people just to house someone in their house just as a public service. The hotels, they couldn't even honor the reservations. That's how bad it got. Well, if a welcoming community, which Sanctuary City, which I I call that a rebrand. You're just calling something, you change the name, it's the same thing. If they're going to enact those policies, what's going to happen if they have a large influx of illegal immigrants? They don't have the housing. We keep hearing about housing crisis, housing this, housing that. I don't know what solution they have, but I know they're going to likely come to the state looking for relief. Well, I assure you that that relief is not going to get provided by the state, and we're not going to allow such a policy to be in effect. All right? I think that what we've seen here, and we've seen in the last couple of years, just under the last administration, under the Biden administration, my colleague from District 23 called it a disaster. I think that was a great understatement, if you ask me, because more people under the Biden administration entered this country illegally than the entire population of the state of New Hampshire. That's how bad it was. Think about that for a second. That's what we were dealing with. And now that the federal government's taken the initiative that they want to now enforce their immigration laws, and they want to actually deport people who are here illegally, who are especially the ones that are dangerous and commit violent crimes or sex crimes, as I mentioned, we want to now have policies that could potentially obstruct that. Well, we're going to take a preemptive action. We're not going to allow any county, any state agency, any local municipality, no school system, nothing. We're not going to allow that policy to be adopted, and I believe this bill has a reasonable enforcement provision in it. I think this is good for the state of New Hampshire. So please join me, support the motion of ought to pass. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gannon, you have a question? Just a quick question. Senator Gannon, please rise.
Thank you,
And who would you like to address your question?
Madam Chair. District 14.
No, I'm up here.
15.
15.
I'm trying to count.
Senator Reardon, will you take the
I'll put the
question?
glasses on again. So, Senator, just a quick question. The fact that I'm holding Lebanon's welcoming ordinance and that it says to law enforcement not to cooperate, not to let federal authorities know release dates, the fact that I'm holding this, doesn't that show that there are sanctuary cities, sanctuary policies at least? Maybe they're not being enforced in the city, but they do exist and they're out there. So isn't that sending the message that in Lebanon, if you cooperate with the feds, which is what we're trying to do, just allow cooperation. The other bill, 62, was asking for active, allowing for active participation. This is just trying to say cooperate. So I have an ordinance that says do not cooperate. Isn't that proving my point?
So that's a conflict with New Hampshire law. New Hampshire law has a provision that law enforcement agencies cooperate with each other. I don't think a welcoming policy, I am sure there's a lot of towns that have a welcoming policy equals a sanctuary city policy, particularly in light of the fact that Lebanon doesn't have the facilities to detain or hold anyone. It's the county that's doing it, and the process that we have right now is working perfectly well, and the county itself has contracts with the federal marshal's office. My point is, it's already covered.
Okay. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Senator Birdsell? Okay. A question has, a roll call has been requested and seconded by Senator Gannon. Okay. The question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 71. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Rochefort.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator McConkey.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
No.
Senator Prentice.
No.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Innes.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Rishardi.
Yes.
Senator Fenton.
No.
Senator McHugh.
Yes.
Senator Avard is excused. Senator Rosenwald.
No.
Senator Reardon.
No.
Senator Murphy.
Yes.
Senator Pearl.
Yes.
Senator Sullivan.
Yes.
Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator Long.
No.
Senator Perkins Coca.
No.
Senator Abbas.
Yes.
I knew I messed up there. Senator Abbas is yes. Senator Gannon.
Yes.
Senator Altschiller.
No.
Senator Carson.
Yes. Okay. The ayes have it. The motion ought to pass is adopted 15-8. This is going to finance. This bill is ordered to the Committee on Finance. Okay. We are. Yes, okay. I recognize Senator Birdsell for a motion.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the Senate adjourn from the early session, that the business of the late session be in order at the present time, that all bills and resolutions ordered to the third reading be, by this resolution, read a third time, all titles be the same as adopted, and that they be passed at the present time.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Okay. The ayes have it. The early session is adjourned. We are now in the late session. Are there any announcements to come before the Senate? Okay. Seeing none, without objection, all personal privileges or unanimous consent or other remarks shall be entered into the permanent journal of the Senate, Rule 2-16 and Rule 2-17. Is there any further business? Okay, seeing none, I recognize Senator Birdsell for a motion.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the business of the day being completed, that the Senate recess to the call of the chair for the purpose of introducing legislation, referring bills to committee, scheduling hearings, sending and receiving messages, vacating bills, and processing enrolled bill reports and amendments. And when we recess to the call of the chair.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay. The ayes have it. The Senate is in recess to the call of the chair.